Let's do the three refuges in English. If everyone wants to join in. I bow to him, the blessed one, the honored one, the fully awakened one. I bow to him, the blessed one, the honored one, the fully awakened one. I bow to him, the blessed one, the honored one, the fully awakened one. I now take refuge in the Buddha. I now take refuge in the Dhamma. I now take refuge in the Sangha. For a second time, I take refuge in the Buddha. For a second time, I take refuge in the Dhamma. For a second time, I take refuge in the Sangha. For a third time, I take refuge in the Buddha. For a third time, I take refuge in the Dhamma. For a third time, I take refuge in the Sangha. 5 precepts. I undertake the training to abstain from intentionally killing living beings. I undertake the training to abstain from taking what is not given. I undertake the training to abstain from abusive sexual acts. I undertake the training to abstain from telling lies and harsh speech. I undertake the training to abstain from taking intoxicants which lead to heedlessness. Forgiveness. If by deed, speech, or thought, foolishly I have done some wrong, may all forgive me, honored ones, who are in forgiveness and compassion strong. I freely forgive anyone who may have hurt or injured me. Above all else, I freely forgive myself. Goodwill. May I be happy. May I be free from stress and pain. May I be free from animosity. May I be free from oppression. May I be free from trouble. May I look after myself with ease. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from stress and pain. May all beings be free from animosity. May all beings be free from oppression. May all beings be free from trouble. May all beings look after themselves with ease. Four Noble Truths. There are these Four Noble Truths of stress, the origination of stress, the ending of stress, and the path leading to the end of stress. These are the Noble Eightfold Path factors of right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right collectedness. Let's turn the page. Let's see. Let's do the goal of the path. This is the direct path for the releasing of entrapped beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and distress, for landing on the way, and for cultivating unbinding, or realizing unbinding, sorry. In other words, the four groundings of awareness. Which four? There is the case where a meditator remains focused on the body in and of itself, energetic, clearly observant, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. One remains focused on feelings, mind, dharmas in and of themselves, energetic, clearly observant, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. Let's do Mogaraja. Look on the world as empty and be forever mindful of that. Having removed the view of self in this way, one is beyond death. And shall we do Bahia?
Sure.
All right. When Bahia, for you, when you see that in the seen is merely the seen, in the heard is merely the heard, in the sensed is merely the sensed, and in the cognized is merely the cognized, then Bahia, you will know you are not derived from that. When Bahia, you are not from that, then Bahia, you will not be in that. When Bahia, you are not in that, then Bahia, you will neither be here, nor beyond, nor in between the two. Just this is the end of suffering. So you can stop recording and we'll have a silent meditation and then we'll begin. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for that silent sit together. Yeah, I was saying a few words maybe before we started to just set the tone for these chats. Was saying that some of you just came as well, that Bhante Panyawansa, the meditation master here, kind of came and went quite a bit over 20 years ago to about 15 years ago, and then disappeared and left me left me in his stead. He really stressed the non-sectarian aspect of awakening. There's a reality of awakening that we all share. We have different vocabularies and different approaches and orientations, but each view is both relative and absolute. Every moment is a moment of awakening. It's important for us, I think, important for me to stress that for you as well. I was mentioning that we talk about right view, and that gives an idea that there's a very specific kind of right view, and that there's a whole host of wrong views. But that idea, I often see people coming in to the Vihara with holding a mental ideal in their head. So they just went on a Ubakin retreat or a Pa-Aksayadal retreat or Vaita retreat, or they have a sloka in their mind. And they're holding, there's an energy of like holding this up as the true banner. And then everything gets compared to that, and they never develop community here. I see them leave quickly because their community is their inner ideal. And it's usually a last retreat or their last sense of, and then the views kind of clamp down, but it's very pernicious. It can be very deep, this idea that there's only one way to do things. And it's especially pernicious when it gets connected to methodologies. There's only one way of doing things, not just one way. But, and so I just wanted to maybe emphasize that point. I think it can't be stressed more enough, the importance of one reality, one cliff of awakening, and it's right here, right now. And I really enjoyed inviting Luciano Mello last month, and I decided to make this a more regular occurrence for a while and chat with people that I find to be humble, awake, and articulate, and invite everyone in the community to come and listen and offer one view among many. And so I guess I've known you for a couple of years now. And one thing that I want to just maybe begin talking about, but one thing that also strikes me about you is your sort of attunement to truth. And I don't know how you would articulate the energy or motivation behind and any sort of major stages in your energy or motivation behind awakening. So if you could just give us maybe a overview or a summary, maybe I thought would be a good place to begin with a view towards the energetics and any sort of self-corrections you might have had along the way, or some people start with suffering, some people have their motivation as truth, some people jump from one side to the other, some people see the unity in the truth of suffering, they see both sides at once. And some people are just motivated for unknown reasons. But people eventually stumble upon the insubstantiality and emptiness of the object, the external object they thought they were seeking. So people may start off with a sectarian view that the Buddha is external, this object here, And then usually people start to make a U-turn and they realize that, oh, we start to take an inner pilgrimage that we all share. We can call ourselves Hindu and Buddhist and Vaita Vedanta and non-dual and all these adjectives, but the path is inwards. And so we begin to take that path. And so I was just wondering if you could give us, sorry for the long introduction, but I want to hear, I'm here to listen to you. We're here to share with you. And just as an overview of the day, we were thinking of maybe chatting for 45 minutes or so, and then doing a Q&A and doing a massage gym.
Maybe some somatic.
Yeah, some somatic play. Okay.
Yeah, I love what you said about just views and the right view, and how, you know, I think of a way that I look at the Noble Eightfold Path, including right view, is that they're just kind of all emergent properties. They're natural expressions of knowing what you are. And so in a sense, the middle path that Buddha laid out, I think it often gets interpreted as like, oh, you shouldn't be, too much that way or too much this way in the relative sense. It's like, oh, don't go too much towards luxury or too much towards austerity, but the middle path, the middle path. And I think he was getting more at beliefs and views, and the middle path is letting go of our fixations that we have with this view is right, that's right, that's wrong. And seeing that these are all just mental constructs. So I guess for me, in terms of, my very fictitious make-believe story, my dreamy journey, I think kind of started with probably like an Alan Watts book back in my early 20s that a friend gave me, in which there's this image of the philosopher, so not as a academic, person that shows up to work in a suit and tie, but philosopher as someone gripped by the passion for truth and wisdom. Fill, live, soft wisdom. So the embodiment of these growing seeds. And he harkened the image of the philosopher as that of a sculptor, in which the sculptor, everything is there for the artwork, for the creation. It's just a matter of chiseling away all that is in the way, all that's precluding this natural innate expression. And so that image really stuck with me. And so it's just
the paring down,
it's
and not a building up.
It's not a building up. It's not a trying to acquire or reach anything, but simply seeing these conditioned patterns, which are expressing themselves in this apparent phenomena that we'll call Tim in this instance, and just
Just what about motivation? I mean, how did that motivate you and energetically drive you to seek awakening or seek the effortless state? What were these sort of big driving forces for you to awaken? Is it kind of the seeing of that it is a pared down state, and that kind of drove you to keep looking for what you were fabricating? Is that summarizing it? Okay.
Yeah,
I want to let you speak.
was
I just
pretty
wanted
much
to
in the
orient. Yeah.
in the absence in which fullness really has a chance to emerge. And so it's you could say, the journey of awakening, for one month is a massive house cleaning, which you're decluttering, where you can see this, getting to that point of decluttering and being like, all right, just got to burn down the whole damn house.
Yeah.
You know, everything must go. And by everything, we're talking about identification with views of who I am, of who others are, of how the world is, in which, clear seeing demonstrates that is just an appearance in your mind as everything else. There, it's a deconstruction, I think, of this idea that there is an objective world out there, and there's this objective me, and we exist within time and space. And this is where we stake our identity, rather than kind of the softening of all these rigidified conditioned views, and seeing, time, space, everything in it, including this idea of me, the concepts that's emerged, including the ideas of whatever you have. They're just all appearing in your mind, and it's just you engaging with different aspects, different faces of yourself, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. It's not time dependent, it's not space dependent.
Was there any sort of obsessive compulsive phase where you went through more intense paring down practices, where every engagement, every time you were talking, you were noticing sort of these fictitious dream worlds being created, and you were just letting them drop, letting them sort of energetically drop at their feet and not pass this barrier of stillness and silence, of non-fabrication? Is there any time that you just trying to get at the energetics of your
I
motivation?
just sense that I was just absolutely possessed
with paring down.
idea of truth. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I mean, it's quite a bit of a story. But I guess if you guys have some patience to,
Can you give us the cliff notes?
story, I'll give a quick cliff note. So my first career, I was working in finance in Chicago at the Board of Trade, and I was wearing a suit to work and everything, and I was really fascinated with trading, because for me it was actually a medium for like deconstructing beliefs. And so it's all about not having a fixed view, a rigid view, and being able to be fluid, dynamic. Anyway, so I was totally in that world for like 6 years and obsessed with it. And then I ended up going to bartend in Glacier Park, Montana, in the national park. And I sublet my whole place, and I realized, like, oh, wow, this is a great deal. I love bartending. I love engaging with people and being in nature. And so I did that, and then I returned to Chicago, and I was like, this makes no sense, leaving Chicago in the summertime and then coming back in the winter. And I was like, I'm just gonna go back to Glacier Park, and I'm gonna give everything away. I'm gonna just live out of my rucksack and be and really, there's these philosophical ideals which I really
And when was
had.
this?
This is like 2013, 2014. All these philosophical ideals of the path is surrender. We're always here. It's always now. It's, like this intellectual knowing is very clear, because it's like, okay, let's live by it. And so I gave everything away. I lived out of a backpack. I went to Glacier Park, and after that point, I kind of created this interdisciplinary studies, I like to call it. I don't know if y'all ever heard of that major in college. And I never found out about it until after I graduated. I was like, this is obvious. Study whatever the heck you want to study. This is perfect. So I kind of created my own interdisciplinary studies curriculum for a couple of years. In between, I was like, okay, I can make plenty of money doing the bartending thing in the national park. And then I go to some cheaper currency place and I study health with a capital H. What does that mean? I don't know what I really want to do. I want to give off this. I'm done with this trading thing. I want to what does this authentic expression look like? And so it was this journey to find this authentic expression in health. And so that led me to studying intentional communities, permaculture, planting trees. It got me deeply into the world of plant medicine. I lived in Peru for 3 months on permaculture programs. And so I went to all these far off worlds. And then I was like, oh, well, if I can experience all these crazy wild states of heaven and bliss, it can't be externally driven. It's got to be here. And so that got me into meditation and living in India as a wannabe yogi. And then it got me into Thai massage, which we'll talk about later, in which I became pretty hooked on Thai massage as kind of the encapsulating all these different modalities that I was studying. And yeah, and it was really, really great. And I kind of always thought of myself as kind of a philosopher. And I spent a lot of time just observing, just reading, just thinking, what does truth mean? What is success, happiness, all these ideals that have been presented, and seeing how they're just completely conditioned based on circumstances. And yeah, it was pretty awesome. Did that for like 6 years. Great. It was really good. And then I got to a point, I was in Bali during COVID. I did a 21-day retreat in the Mahasi tradition, which was, I don't know if y'all are familiar. So it's like noting. So it's for like 21 days, you're just noting everything, thinking, feeling, color, seeing, sounds, hearing. And you're doing that literally like 18, 20 hours a day in between walking and sitting meditations. And then it's followed at the end with the determination phase, which is no sleep for 3 days. So all different sorts of stuff comes up, really in Theravada Buddhism, I think they call it, what's the word? Anupai. So it's like this latent anger, greed, and delusion, that Vipassana can really, the burning embers that can just bring up to the surface, all this stuff. And anyway, so some wild rides. And then and it culminated in cessations and a lot of different really wild experiences, which I'm not going to go into. But the point
The
is,
cessation of perception and feeling, and cessation of all thought, the cessation of
the cessation of anything perceivable, because there's no subject, there's no object, there's no sense of a subject, there's no object, there's nothing, there's just nothing. And time just stopped for like 5 hours. I started sitting down. I was this was the first day of the sleep deprivation, where I experienced my first cessation. And I remember I couldn't even remember the technique of the meditation. There's these touching points. I couldn't remember anything. And I was like, I just got to sit down. And I just sat down. I couldn't do anything. And that was at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, the morning bell went off at like 4 in the morning. I was like, holy crap.
So
time just completely stopped.
Experiences, time can stop.
Yeah. So and then I get to Bali. I was living in Bali during the lockdown, and I remember distinctly remembering I'm sitting at my my little home. I've got a balcony overlooking the jungle. Great place to be on lockdown. And I'm having a coffee, and I remember thinking, it's like, wow, I'm just so fortunate. I see all these images come to my mind, all these images that I've had over the 6 years, and just what a gift, all these beautiful, loving relationships, all these amazing experiences. And like, I could die. I'm just totally content and happy to die. There's nothing else I really want to experience. I don't really have any desires. I kind of saw all these images presenting themselves. At this point in my journey, the idea of the past was already kind of a construct, like memory is something that's radically constructive. It's actually a radically creative act, and so I kind of viewed all of time, like I was just like disengaged, just like watching this slideshow. And shortly thereafter, shortly after the serious dark night that lasted about a year and a half or
Mhm.
2 years kind of came on, in which I got this idea of enlightenment, which it was never a predominant idea before. It was always awakening to enlightenment. I was right here, this journey that was always kind of my lens. And then I got this idea. I was like, no, it's like this, I just got to get to the bottom of who I fundamentally am. I just became kind of possessed.
Can I interject at this point? I just want to offer some uh, fair warning for people that often, some people get to an awakening experience. I think you're describing an awakening experience, and can be a sort of honeymoon period of grace for a while. What happens with that experience is, of course, the dropping of perceptual filters. And so there's just a direct perception of reality as it is. And we often find that traumas are being held in a state of repression or suppression through this filtering of identity. As me over here, the world over here, I'm in control, I manage my world. But when all that breaks down, there's a sort of immediacy, and some of these traumas can come up at that time. And so we recommend seeing people who've also gone through this path before, and professionals as well, for assistance and at this time. Often in our generation, for earlier generations, we didn't have all the awakened psychotherapists that we have now, but there are awakened psychotherapists that can assist you in this type of process, and a lot more knowledge about how to work with that layer when it does come up. A lot of people will try and rebuild up their sense of self and then resuppress it. And sometimes people have different processes at this moment, but it is very typical experience that you're describing right now. And I just wanted to interject that.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I would say that's when, for me, the what I'd call the journey of awakening actually, I don't want to say necessarily began. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of different shifts and stages on it, but this notion that I guess I just started to see more layers of like addiction to thought that I had, and really just how that's what's precluding clear seeing. And I would also make the caveat, I don't think it's seeing reality as it is. I don't think we ever see reality as it is. I think we see reality as we are. And it's knowing as just subjective interpreting, and not identifying as an object, as a particular. And it's just subjective knowing. Um, but within, my experience recollecting back of this time, it was very much pedestalized as this idea of this, what I would call in a sense, kind of maybe an unskillful way of conceiving of enlightenment as, something that's actually a state to acquire, to obtain, you know, and that, I think, that's a view, right? It's a view. That's what the Buddha is talking about the middle path, and that, you know, that view um, kind of express itself in an energetic contraction, as views do generally. It's in their energetic contractions. That's the only preclusion to, um, our nature, which is, boundless, open, not something that is dependent on time nor space. And yeah, for 1.5 years, this is all just struggling with his mind, wanting to do something, and knowing that, intellectually, knowing very clearly that no matter, like, the act of seeking actually posits that there's a seeker and there's something to actually seek. And that's an energetic contraction. That's a view, right? Because how can the eye see itself? You can just be yourself, right? But yeah, so I was just kind of yeah, possessed, and then at Bhavana, November 2021, it's just like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm just dreaming this whole enlightenment thing up, like everything else. And then it's just, whoosh. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to what I really like to do. I'm gonna take care of my mom in Charlottesville. I'm gonna do community building because I love building community um, and spreading the gospel of touch and somatic exploration, because that's just how this phenomenon here is kind of hardwired, you know. That's and so yeah, that's what I've been doing for 3 or 4 years since. Here's my story done.
I wanted to maybe circle back on a couple things you said, but let me look at the time for a minute. It's 10 o'clock. Um, so, um, is there a is there a time when I think you mentioned one view that there's no, say, no individual is enlightened. No, the ego is never enlightened. I think a lot of people have a view that the ego can somehow be worked with and modified and perfected. And so when a lot of people have this view that it's pretty universal, that they have to be a good person to wake up. And it is consistent with awakening to perfect a sense of goodness, because sense of remorse can be built in and can create a back there and an out there, and a sense of uh, type of trying to build a sort of external identity in the world that can get in the way of actually of waking up and seeing our true nature. Um, but is there at any time, are there other instances that people can become aware of, that you become aware of, where you had maybe an artificial construct, like an ideal? We were talking about holding views and identities very tight inside, and that you had a sort of almost, it can be experienced almost physiologically in the body, with almost just kind of like an exhale that just doesn't end, and a whole structure kind of releases inside. Um, and are there any types of, I call them course corrections, in addition, maybe not, but in addition to what you just mentioned, where you felt you sort of let go of this external view that you were seeking, and a sort of course correction, um, back to back to presence, back to where it all begins and it leaves. But if not, that's okay. I can move on to other things.
Yeah, so you're asking if there is like a somatic,
Yeah.
like letting.
Have you
letting go.
experienced it somatically in your body? Are there any moments of, because it is, I mean, maybe you feel it, you can almost feel it every second for the rest of your life. We do have these identities in the world, and we have jobs, and we have families, and we have relationships, and we build up structures around them. We see through them, but we affirm both worlds. We can live in both worlds, as empty and full as actors in the world. Is there at any point, though, where you really let go of sort of an inner tension, an inner contraction?
Yeah.
You can describe for us at least one.
Sure, I've gotten another story that I can think of that points to that. So I was living in Sacred Dimension is a plant medicine center outside of in a small little village Koi outside of Cusco in the Andes. I was doing permaculture work there in the garden with the local Quechua, uh, you know, villager was working there with me. Such a good setup. It's so cool. It's like there's so many just really amazing opportunities that you have no idea that even exist. They're just waiting there in imagination to be discovered, you know? And this is such a great example, such a beautiful place. But yeah, so I would get, I would do free, free room and board and plant medicine work in exchange for the help on tending the land. And had lots of experiences with both Huachuma, which is a cactus San Pedro, and ayahuasca, in which I felt just there is an energetic contraction, there is some holding in which is invariably lies, intertwined with some sort of belief structure. They go together, like the Buddha never really distinguished between, thoughts and feelings. They just all kind of go to bed together. And I remember in this one session with the shaman was playing his Icadoros. It's a big dark room in the temple. And I remember just sitting there meditating and nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. It's like, oh, okay. There are some expectations there. And then all of a sudden, my friend started strumming his guitar really lightly, and one of the chords just hit me. And I just saw myself as this newborn, and I was sucking on the teat of one level it could be my mom, but it was more so this like the metaphorical like mother, Um, and I just broke down and just started crying, just tears, just wailing. I was just wailing there for like 15, 20 minutes crying because it was like the hurt and sadness for seeking that mother for so long externally, Um, and then just this peace and just like you said, this extended sigh, you know, knowing that she's actually always there. She's actually always there for me, no matter where I am. I'm always held.
The end
You
of
know?
grieving.
Yeah, I'm always held, and it was just this
Never.
belief, this condition. Like there are all these just there's so many conditioned beliefs that are from so young that separate us from this mother, from this sense of really being held. And yeah, so it was just like tears erupting, like and it was all just somatically driven, like you were saying. It was all just an expression of that deep sigh, and then I remember after that, then I just started dancing, and I was still crying, but those tears were expressing themselves as just like this joy in being,
The significance, I think, of the third noble truth can't be, you know, uh, set aside. It's significant that there is a permanent end to suffering. There's a permanent cessation of suffering. I think a lot of people want to believe it but don't believe it, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have these talks, is that so that people could describe those moments where they either understood that there has always been release and nothing but release and there's no clinging in the world, or that they actually do let go. There's a permanent shift where they do let go. Because there are a lot of awakenings, there's a lot of mini realizations, but there are cliffs that can't be turned back upon. Um, and um, and they're often felt physiologically in the body. The body will go through changes physiologically. I had epileptic seizures every few weeks, every few months, until my second shift, and all my epileptic activity disappeared over the course of a 5-month meditation retreat, and I've had none since. It's not uncommon to experience physiological shifts. Some people go for the better, but I've heard of people actually having physiological problems after awakening. So it's not always for the better. But I was just curious if there are any sort of, that sigh that sort of, you know, ends all sighs, at least to some degree, a sort of ending cliff, a sense that there actually is an end, even just an edge or a cliff, and that you're standing there. And but I think that's it can come in any form, and I think that's certainly an excellent example because the end of soka, the end of grief, is very significant when we realize that the basis of grief is love, and that we love here on the inside, and it was never an external object that we were seeking, and it's always been here. Suddenly fullness takes the place of that loss, and we experience that fullness for the rest of our lives. And we still can engage in relationships and create structures of acceptance and loss and things like that, but there's it moves within a spaciousness and a fullness that's undeniable.
Yeah, yeah. I prefer to think about, instead of like the end of suffering, which these time, it, again, I think a good rule of thumb in navigating this space is like, all right, um, if it's in time and space, if it depends on time, how can you say it's real? Right? Like, it's not like time is out there. You're constructing time. Always, you're constructing space, you know? Um, and for something to say to have an end, it must have a beginning. And where's the beginning of anything? How does anything begin? This doesn't even make any sense. It's always a, a big bundle of conditioned phenomena, enveloping into itself, just continually appearing new in this moment. And just as quickly as a mind tries to grasp onto it, it's already gone. So there's no even present moment. That doesn't even make any sense. There's no past, there's no future, there's no present moments. There's minds identifying, taking something that's doesn't have any inherent existence and saying, oh, it does. Look, this is real. This is my memory. This is real. And that's constantly what minds are doing. So awakening is a journey of, you could say, clear seeing right here, in which it's not a seeing reality as it is, because there is no reality as it is. There's a subjective. That's going on. Um, and so referring to so rather than seeing like the end of suffering, which I think can easily get us into this idea of like there's something to achieve to end the suffering, just not taking the mind's bullshit to be real. And you can just play much more lightly. And it's like, so rather than these thoughts dominating my experience, they just become lighter and lighter and lighter. Right. And so like this space that thoughts take up, it's kind of like, how much space is seeing taking up right now? What is seeing made of? Seeing is colors. That's it. What else in seeing is there but colors? How much space does that take up? How much space do these sounds right now that are coming out of this mouth? How much space does it take up? What about these feelings in the body? How much space is it? doesn't even make any sense to talk about, right? It's the same thing with thoughts. And they're beautiful and luminous in their emptiness. And that emptiness leaves space for the totality of what you are, you know? So that's the lens that I kind of prefer in talking about this stuff is like this we stop taking the mind's tricks to be true, you know. And then we can just remember, oh yeah, yeah, just this. Right? Just this.
So, would you say that you're aligned with sort of a path of inquiry, a self-inquiry, um, more throughout your, awakening experiences, or would you say a combination of sort of a path of practice of seeing emptiness in every moment as the natural unfolding of this moment, or is there any sort of and if you do feel aligned, I think everyone who awakens that I've met has intense periods of investigation and inquiry. I think it's just unavoidable. I've never met anyone who just sits and relaxes and
Yeah.
meditates on mindfulness. There has to be some element of investigation into what's real, into nature of reality, the nature of self, and the nature of the construction of reality. I was wondering if there are any questions, particular powerful questions that you would ask,
Yeah.
that you would maybe, if you had 5 minutes to wake everyone up in this room and show, um, catch a glimpse, what would be a question word? Some people call it like a dangerous question, that would threaten the construction, construction of the self-making process enough just to give it a chance to open up and see something different. What would that be?
I never even really heard about self-inquiry at all until when I became possessed with this idea of enlightenment, after like 2021. And so, yeah, my path was always in the interest, not knowing who I am or, you know, um, trying to get an answer, but more so just wanting to be very precise at looking at how the mind constructs its experience. And that has always been my interest. And I would say monomaniacal interest. Like that's all I really care about, no matter what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I got into, again, this was before I left for Glacier Park, 2014, 2015. I got really into quantum mechanics. And I'd say that was my actual first gateway, really. You guys ever read like any of like the early writings of like any of the founders of quantum mechanics, like Heisenberg, Max Planck, Pauli, John Archibald Wheeler, like any of these guys? It's kind of for me indistinguishable between like reading the Dhammapada or like excerpts of the Bhagavad Gita. Um, for various reasons, there's been kind of a shift away from talking about the big C, consciousness in physics departments. That's a quick way to like, you know, end your tenure. There's a saying in physics department: shut up and crunch the numbers. So like letting go of any interpretations of the spooky stuff that's going on at the nano level, right? And you read like Heisenberg, he'll say like matter, there's no such thing as matter. There's only spirit. Or Max Planck, he'll say, you know, mind is the matrix of all matter. The only thing that's real is mine. So they're all talking like in terms like this, like John Archibald Wheeler, like we have to give up this dead idea of like an objective universe. Like this is a co-creative, like participatory universe, right? So they're all talking like this, reading this, and then I was like, huh, how are my deeply rooted beliefs actually informing my experience of reality? Um, and I just really took that question in earnest. And I would kind of explore and play, what about this idea that we're all just atoms glued together by chance, and that's what exists out there? And like this deeply, that like the scientific materialism, which for so many of us is like our de facto religion. And oh, things just happen by chance. What if everything that happens is actually there because that's what's expressing itself in like this novel that's expressing itself through this point of view of a Tim? And so my practice simply became opening up to whatever is arising as just the information that I need. That this story of like this soul progressing in experience is only learning. There's nothing else. It's just the mind that superimposes good and bad, all these concepts onto it. Anyway, so I started doing that, and yeah, like that's a good way to burn karma. That's a great way. Just whatever's arising, and if there's any uncomfortable emotions, just never pointing a finger. There's three fingers pointing back, and just seeing how this mind is internalizing whatever's arising is simply a function of different conditioned phenomena within myself, which is creating a point of view, which is creating a fixed view. And so seeing the subjectivity inherent in my view, in which suffering is downstream from the rigidity of this view, and seeing how that's false. That's my practice in a nutshell, just doing that. And yeah, and I think that leads to a pretty awesome experience once you start to do that, because if I just share one quick story here. So I was living in Colombia at my friend's eco farm, and I had a fun little gig. I was pretty much just following around this guy Manuel for 5 months. He wouldn't speak any English to me. My Spanish was pretty crappy. He built and constructed this beautiful eco house, and I was just going into all sorts of adventures with him. He wanted to study anthropology in college. He dropped out after his freshman year of the best college in Colombia, studying anthropology, because he's like, I want to really be an anthropologist. So he just hitchhiked across South America for 5 years, staying with indigenous people and advocating for them. And he wouldn't touch any of his parents' money. His parents came from like a lot of wealth, wouldn't touch it, had Rastafarian dreads. Anyway, so I was pretty much just lacking him around for 5 months. And one of his good friends, Anna, who's also kind of like a Rastafarian, had large dreads. Manuel was away on a film shoot with some indigenous people for like a week, and I was pretty much just hanging out with Anna. And Anna would trigger the living hell out of me because she had this persona. She was like, I cheated 3 Vipassanas. She's so spiritual, and like she triggered everyone around. Like there's just like a sense of like she just had to be really critical, just like the way she would say things. It just really triggered. So it wasn't just me. It was like everyone around would also get triggered by her. But so I'm staying with her for 3 days, and I go to Manuel's mom. She was living in this eco house, and her name's Clement. She's like a Buddhist practitioner, like 40 years. I'm telling Clement, like, I don't know what it is about Anna, but like I'm feeling drained around her. And she's like, well, yeah, well, she's an energy vampire, but but also she's also your best teacher. And I was like, huh. She's like, yeah, she's telling you just what you need to know. And I started thinking about it. I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And so there's a contraction here. And then I started to actually view her like, you are my best teacher, Anna. And what do you know? What happened? Literally, she shifted right in front of her. She manifested my experience as a completely different person
Mm.
when I made that shift. When I saw that, it was just my lens and how I was relating with Anna, which might be similar to other people's lenses, you know? But yeah, and so that was a pretty yeah, and you can just feel that energy, like you can feel the contraction just lift away, you know, which I often find whenever I say I'm wrong. If there's any sort of conflict with anyone, and I'm just like, I really make an effort to try to see in their perspective and how they're feeling. Um, I also notice that energetic contraction lift, which comes from this righteousness. I'm right, man.
Yeah. Yeah, the notion of like a bubble of reality is, I think, fundamental to really, at least it was for me, for kind of launching the investigation on the path that we're creating, that we're living in a world in which we think others exist, but we're actually manufacturing a relationship with reality. And and it's a wholly sort of self-contained dynamic that responds to clinging of views, clinging to the world as an object, and creates a sort of almost theater of the self, where we're finding each, you know, problem on the outside to actually be a manifestation or a pointer back on the inside that we can actually awaken from. And sort of seeing that sort of bubbleness. Some people align that with these days. There's some really good people like Pernille Demore and Todd Lent who are working with the 10 fetters, and they align that with the sort of the fetter of identity view, and and that's, I think, you know, an inspiration that can really last a lifetime. It's something you see. Once you see it, you don't unsee it. You see it everywhere you go, and it opens the heart to compassion when you start seeing that, as your story and your explanation was so beautiful and touching. And it transforms the world when you start seeing that. It transforms people and it transforms your world as well. And I thought that was a beautiful a beautiful description. Thank you.
Yeah. The first 5 fetters that, according to that 10 fetter model, um, yeah, it's just a just seeing that tendency to do that like all the time, and just having the you could call it clear seeing to pause when that instinct arises, which is just a habit also. It's just a habit, you know. That's kind of how I view, like, you know, another way to view enlightenment. Well, what's his name? He wrote Contemplative Fitness.
Kenneth.
Huh?
Kenneth?
Kenneth Folk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kenneth Folk. He describes enlightenment really simply. He's like, it's just seeing things completely as a process. There's no self. There's no self involved. It's just nature. Everything is nature expressing itself in the exact perfect form that it can only express itself given these conditions. And so this is a way, not doing that, seeing that instinct and just seeing that your experience is simply a function of a way of seeing. And this is a process. It it just turns life into like an infinite game. Right? Because it's like the idea of like outcome and achieving something. It's just like you're just playing with a system, and there's, what is that line from some Buddhist masters? Like, you know, it's we're each infinitely perfect with infinite room for improvement. Right? And the infinite room for improvement part is when you see yourself, when it's just a process. And so in one sense,
Did that surprise you that the end was always ending, that it was always processing and end? there was an ever as the end was always ending. It was always processing itself.
Yeah.
And that you were not processing it, that it was just always processing itself.
Yeah. There's no
It's
agency at all.
surprising because you expect enlightenment, awakening to be an absolute end. It's what everyone wants. It's an absolute end, an absolute cliff, and suddenly you're off the cliff, but you're always at the edge, processing, ending,
Mm,
and it just keeps happening. Yeah, but it's not suffering. It's because it's always ending. It's always leaving itself,
yeah.
and it's doing it. Yeah, that's a powerful realization. That shocks a lot of people.
Yeah.
When they wake up.
Yeah.
Well, can we transition to some couple questions, and then we will maybe have a bio break and do some somatics. Does that sound good?
Sounds fun.
And we have
Yeah.
people, I assume, on Zoom, and feel free to chirp and let us know if you have a question as well.
Folks on Zoom. I didn't know there's folks on Zoom.
Yeah, do you want to tell us who's on and the names? As we
Three, Rupa and Spiegelman. Two people.
Jennifer.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Howdy. Yeah, I'd love to hear from some of y'all and dream your anything's alive for you.
Tim, Jonathan, yeah, thank you for speaking. Thank you for sharing. I just let it wash over me, everything. And yeah, just wondering, what you're talking about when you're saying like you turn to the somatic or you turn to, your sort of somatic way of being hardwired, what did that mean for you in terms of practice? Like, how did your kind of practice and approach to awakening yourself, reality, how did that change?
How did my approach to awakening kind of change through introduction of different somatic practices? Wow, yeah, there's so many great somatic practices to really help you. So one of them I'll speak with Thai massage, and how integral I think that's been for me, and I think that can just in general be as a tool for awakening. I As you can kind of gather, I'm really big in breaking down how we see and kind of having clarity in that, like, my experience is dependent upon how I'm relating with this experience. There's nothing inherent within the circumstances that's good or bad. There's just a mind that makes it so. That's conditioned towards certain ways of seeing. So through different somatic practices, I think it could be very helpful to help break down some of these rigidified structures. And so when I teach Thai massage, and one of the, for like 8 years, I've been doing these Thai massage jams ever since I got hooked on Thai massages. Just as powerful, it feels great. It's just like a great way to spend your time. Massage is awesome. And it's something that we can all do. We don't have to go through all this like training, like we can all be doing this for each other, And I think if you're looking at maybe more evolved cultures, like, why wouldn't everyone be giving each other massages? That makes perfect sense, right? It's a great way to spend time, going into the direct feeling and sensations rather than, constantly being in this like conceptual world, taking the mind's thoughts to be true and past or future. And
Thai Buddhist monasteries that I've been to, every moon day, we all exchange Thai massage with each other. The serious ones where people are meditating in particular for awakening, it's once a week. The moon day is once a week.
Yeah. It's great. My teacher from Thai massage, he passed away like in the early 2000s before I got a chance to study with him. But Oshakananda, he was a monk in the in the Theravada forest tradition, and he had a line, that I really love, that was really influential. Land like a butterfly, sinking like an elephant, right? And so always coming from that place of softness, gentleness, and giving weight from that. And that's when I kind of realized, in my own life, when I first heard that, and like all the conflicts, all the drama, unskillful ways of showing up, maybe it's like, I went in like an elephant. Boom, straight in like an elephant. There wasn't that soft quality with it. Um, and so then I remember actually we did a blindfolded massage. With it was a 200-hour training in Laos, and there's like 50 of us, and we're blindfolded. And I'm giving this hour-long blindfold massage to this one woman. I'm like in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm doing such a good job. Oh God, so great. This must feel great for her, And I'm like congratulating myself. And then we have feedback afterwards, and she's like, Tim, it hurt at times. You're like all over the place. And I didn't feel that sometimes you're really listening that well to my body. And that was such a big aha of how in my mind there could be such a wide gap, right? Of her experience and my experience. And that set me off on a journey of some real inquiry. So for the rest of the month in that training, I remember land like a butterfly, singing like an elephant. I just kept on coming back with all my massage. And I would stop when I sensed I was using my muscular effort. Because again, that's one of the principles, like how can you be effortless in how you move? So as opposed to how often we're doing massage, and it's like, we think it's like, this is a task, I'm doing massage to you. It's like, well, that's not right view. Because there is a view, there's a me that's doing this to you. And so how can you be soft? How can you really use gravity and use your body weight, and use the body weight of the other person? And how can I reposition this body in space and time, or reposition my partner's body within space and time to be effortless, right? So for me, it's a way of deconstructing the rigidity of this belief that there is something objective out there, and there's rather, seeing the subjectivity of this experience and seeing how, oh, you can get a totally different experience if I just move, and it could be totally effortless for me if I move and reposition in a certain way, or I move you in a certain way.
And that there's this like place that's moving between the butterfly and the elephant. Always there's this place. That's beautiful.
Yeah. That's one way. And another way that I like to think of the Thai massage also, I think of a lot, like I've studied a lot of different somatic practices, and I'm the first principles guy. I like to go back to first principles. I'm like, what are the tenets here? And you understand the tenets, right? And then from the tenets, from the principles, action emerges, right? Rather than thinking about the techniques top down, and how do I get these techniques right without really taking into account what's behind the techniques. So I like to think of when I'm giving a Thai massage, it's like you got this masculine energy, you got this feminine energy, you got this yang and yin, and you're playing in this space of these different energies. And I like to think of the feminine maybe as like much more slow and grounding. And then the masculine energy is just like this chaos, coming in to mix it up, to kind of orchestrate this experience for the recipient of, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. Like the mind's just constantly trying to figure what's going on, and I'm taking them out of that experience and creating a gateway just into this direct tuning in to the aliveness of the sensations and the sounds, and maybe thoughts might come up also spontaneously, in which something that wants to move is able to move.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions.
So,
What's your name?
Shantanu,
Hey, Shantanu.
in your experience, uh, uh, did you like find that as you start to see things as processes that eventually end, like, a phenomena that, end naturally,
Mm.
does that lead to development of apathy, uh, not lowering of empathy, but lowering of sympathy is how you still see the suffering, but and not just in yourself, but in others as well. But you are not like terribly like bothered because of the impermanence of what's happening, right? Does that is that like that at some level like that bothers
Yeah.
you know bothers me. I mean, not that
Mm.
but the more meditation like makes you see things that way.
Yeah.
I like apathy is something that kind of bothers me.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Is there
How do you define apathy? Lack of compassion?
lack of
Like a feeling.
sympathy, but not lack of empathy? Lack, like there is good empathy there because you are feeling what the other person is feeling, or the other sentient being is feeling, right? But you also know that this is a phenomena that will end for that sentient being or for yourself, right? So there is an element of lowered sympathy, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word for it,
Yeah.
but it does feel like lower apathy, like more apathy towards suffering. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can just share my experience. Um. Uh. Yeah. Apathy. I would say the just questioning my mind's ability to know whether something is necessarily good or bad in someone else's experience naturally leads to some, I could call it disengagement from from seeing suffering in others. So I guess based on that language, I guess you could call that apathy. Yeah, it's just like in my own personal experience. I mean, I look at sometimes what I would consider bad, painful, difficult situations. You look back, it's like that's where the gold is. I don't want to deprive someone of the opportunity to really struggle and see for themselves and be able to transcend that suffering. That's I would argue kind of not right view. It's having a view of what's best for that other person. Um, hmm. Yeah, yeah,
I can feel into what you're saying as well.
yeah,
I had a similar realization in my practice as well. Sometimes the wisdom practices and the heart practices can feel antagonistic to each other, but usually where they're going to is there's actually a dynamic relationship between the two, and sometimes you emphasize one side and sometimes the other, and they sort of play with each other in a sort of dance, but they eventually merge, and you see when they merge and they become one and the same. And these types of experiences of feeling like, oh, wisdom is getting in the way of my heart practice change because they're also fed by a cultural view that when someone tells you that so and so died in their family, we're shifting out of a cultural matrix where we have to beat ourselves really hard and suffer as much as that other person, and we might not be in deep a tier position the way we would have been 10 years ago before we started practicing, because we do see the wisdom of impermanence And we become a point of stability, though, in that wisdom for the other person to help draw them out of suffering. And it's not a lack of compassion, but it's actually an increase in love as well. You start seeing the love and the wisdom and the wisdom in the love. And that's when they begin to merge. But you do have these kind of cultural awakenings where we have these views of what suffering should be and how I should be in the world with suffering. And what's actually happening is we're waking up from those cultural forms, and we're seeing which pieces of them are true and resonate with us in our path in the future, and which ones don't. And they naturally let go in the recognition and the act of recognizing them, and we move forward.
I'd also say, just with impermanence, that word, it it rings a bell. I think it's important to remember. I think that's one of the, what is it called, the 3 characteristics. But Rob Rebea, in his book Seeing That Frees, if anyone's familiar with that, he really makes the case. He's like, it's important to realize that's actually an intermediary step. That doesn't get you to liberation. Right? I mean, it can be a skillful lens. And I think viewing all the 3 characteristics not as like truth, but like potentially skillfully lenses in certain contexts. And yeah, because impermanence depends on permanence and the structure of time, and yeah, so yeah, for me, what's arisen is, like I end up doing like a lot of community volunteering and help, and not because I want to, with like underserved populations, not just because there's just like I don't know, just like a wanting to love whoever and wherever you're with, and this sense that, yeah, whether that appears as joy or sadness, it's just experiencing yourself through these different constructs that the mind wants to label as this or that. Some good question. And I would also say, kind of maybe related, is for me, nihilism. It that has been in my experience, I'd say, in the past, and I'd say from my experience often in the journey of awakening, is it is a stepping stone to something. But again, that's a view, and so it's seeing the emptiness of that, and in that seeing of the full emptiness of all these views, it's just kind of what the Greeks call agape, which is just like just like a awe and a gratitude for whatever is arising.
Nihilism is a view. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Even the view that there's no view is a view, as the Buddha said in one of his Majjhima Nikaya teachings. Okay, one last question maybe, and then we'll have a break. And then I think what I got from this is an active monastery, of course, and so I think there's always an unplanned event happening, and it'll happen here. But if we're on that half of the room for the somatic portion, then we'll be fine. So after this question, we'll just, I guess, turn the recording off and have a bio break and move towards the back of the room. So, all right, Lyndon, welcome.
What's your name again?
Lyndon.
Hey, Linda.
So as you were telling about your experiences with the indigenous community in Peru, I was really resonating with that experience, having just had like very brief experiences with indigenous communities in Mexico, and just feeling like in those spaces and in learning about indigenous belief systems and traditions, there's just so much more openness and I want to say presence, but I feel like that's an imperfect descriptor, and like coming back to our like very capitalist, materialist society, I feel like it's like what I felt there is like I'm having a hard time like tapping back into that. And I'm wondering if like when you came back to the US and like reintegration and if you had any of those challenges of like taking what you've learned in other parts of the world and just maintaining it or like finding it in different places here, because I just feel like it's so hard here to
Yeah.
to find that.
Yeah. Reintegration has always been tough. You know, I was like the first trip I did around the, well, when I was 25, I was couch surfing for like a year around Asia as a staying with locals. And yeah, trying to reintegrate back into American society was is tough. Yeah. I mean, I think it also can be a gateway to living with pathos, you know, living with like real compassion, you know, and seeing the lack of community, the lack of connection, that all these would appear as these problems around us, they're arising as nature perfectly expressing itself as nature, and emergent of conditions that are present. And a lot of those conditions is a absence of clear thinking, is often a addiction to conceptual ways of, you know, taking your dream to be, you know, true in some sense, and just getting completely caught and lost in this dream, which is very counter for my experience. You know, I stayed with the Arahuacos in Colombia for a couple of weeks. It's had amazing privilege. They're one of the 4 indigenous groups in Colombia. The Sierra Nevada mountains are 20,000 foot high mountains, and they drop off right to the water. It's really amazing. And one of my friends, he worked with the Arahuacos to sell cacao to like local hostels, and he asked me if I could come and take a machete and help clear some fields with them. And so I spent 2 weeks with the Arahuacos, and I remember just, you know, the mamos, the taitas were all white, right, with white top hats to represent that, you know, for one, the snow-capped Sierra Nevada peaks, but also that they view themselves as the elders, and they view us here in the West as younger brother, little brother, lost from mom and confused, right? We've lost connection from our mother from source, which is always with us. And they just have such compassion and love for us in the face when they've experienced genocide by the Colombian government, you know, I mean, for centuries. And their population is just being wiped down, and they're just being pushed into smaller and smaller areas. It's really remarkable to see. But yeah, so just coming and just seeing, wow, you know, yeah, everyone just really is dying for presence and connection. And coming back to that Krishnamurti line, you know, J.D. Krishnamurti, what did he say? He's like, the most profound expression of love is a giving of our full attention. And just coming back to that, no matter who we're with, no matter what we're doing, just seeing it as just this perfect expression of nature. That's all there is to do. There's nothing, what else is there to do?
Thank you so much. I'm sensing the need to end and move back. If we could just recite the first line here. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. Thank you. All right, someone wants to, thank you. You can stop recording. Yeah, thank you. Someone wants to